Hi, welcome to day 8. In today's pull, I want to pull a few cards. They're not specific questions, but they're around the idea of why people use violence as an answer. And the reason I want to talk about it is because it finally dawned on me why the Bhagavad Gita is still relevant and why people to this day still use a war allegory as a morality lesson or as like a religious lesson, because it always bothered me to think that like, well, why is going to war being justified by a god in this allegory, right? And I understand that a lot of people will say, well, it's an extreme example and it's just basically to illustrate the fact that we as humans in this one little life don't understand the entire, all the multitudes of all the worlds of all of time, and of the divinatory beings. Like, we have no idea, and it is your responsibility to live the life that you were meant to live. Okay, so I get that. But also, like, people like Gandhi, like, he was a devout Hindu and he's all about nonviolence. And so I always wondered, like, why didn't they just use violence against the colonial power, against the British, to kick them out, because they were there for 200 years. So why didn't they just reciprocate? I mean, there could have been another reason, just like logical, like maybe we didn't have the cohesion in India to kick them out, or the firepower, or I don't know. I have no idea. But that just always seemed like those two things don't go together. And I just never found a good reason why. Like I never found a good mystical reason why the Bhagavad Gita is still relevant in today's society, where it's pretty much like most people agree that violence is not the answer. But yet violence, we spend the most money on defense in the US, and scientists all over the world, top scientists are used for defense and weapon creation. So it's like violence isn't the answer, but it's also the answer. Anyways, so that's always bothered me about the Bhagavad Gita. And then recently with, the CEO UHC guy being SHOT fatally, and people really lauding, or people just expressing their lack of concern for someone like that dying, when there are hundreds and thousands of people that have been dying, were dying the same time he was, today and tomorrow, all over the world, who get no coverage whatsoever, no matter how violent their deaths have been. No matter what, no one else gets this much coverage. The entire city doesn't shut down because of one murder. There's just a lot of people are just getting really sick of it. So it got me thinking about the Bhagavad Gita. And so basically, really quickly, the Bhagavad Gita is one small portion of the Mahabharatam, which is an Hindu religious epic from India. And the Bhagavad Gita is, so the Mahabharata is basically two families warring. They go to war. And the Bhagavad Gita is Arjuna, who's part of the Pandavas, 5 brothers. He is in a chariot going to go to war. And he's telling his charioteer, I don't want to do it. I want to put down my swords. I don't want to fight my brothers and my cousins and people I've grown up with. And, I know all of them. We've trained together. I don't want to do it. And he doesn't know that his charioteer is a god, from what I understand. He might know. I don't know. But anyway, so then Krishna is his charioteer. And Krishna basically says, this is your dharma, this is what you've been born to do, you are a warrior. And so Krishna opens his mouth and reveals multitudes of universes and galaxies and basically says, you are integral to doing your dharma so that your karma and everybody else's can do theirs. So they can do the things that they need to do so that other people can do the things that, like we're all very intricately connected in our karma and our dharma and what we need to do, right? So it's vital that you do the things that you're meant to do, basically. And so in some people's eyes, it's basically Krishna, who is a god, telling Arjuna, who doesn't want to fight, who's saying, I'm not going to kill my brothers, who doesn't want to fight. And Krishna is saying, no, you must go and fight. Like, you don't know, like this is one tiny little thing in everything going on right now. And this is a vital part of it, because you have a role, because your role is hinged upon so that other people can play their role, whether or not you like it. I could be wrong, and if y'all have a better way of describing it or a different way of looking at it, please let me know. I've just never really read an interpretation that I'm just like, oh, okay, I see it. Because, it's a very patriarchal way of looking at things. Like, there's got to be so many stories where it doesn't involve violence, and I'm just like tired of learning, again, like morality from war, when we all agree again that like violence is not the answer. And yet people always say war is inevitable. And it's like, why? War is only inevitable because you have a certain way of thinking about things. You need to change the way you think about things and about the world. And, so I also understand like, religions and scripture, like the Bhagavad Gita and everything, you're not supposed to take literally. And this is it's an extreme example to illustrate the ideas of dharma and karma. And, following through with what you have to do in this life. And it's an ideal, like we're not supposed to follow everything that is written in these scriptures, right? But I still think that we look to these very violent ways of learning how we're supposed to be humans towards one another. Okay, that being said, with this whole UHC incident, and just since the election, like people are just getting a lot more frustrated, and like talking isn't helping, because this country and many countries around the world are still supporting bajillionaires who care about no one but themselves, right? Like that's the feeling, and that's the notion that many people are getting. So with that incident a few days ago, I was thinking about how I kind of understand why violence now is inevitable to a certain extent. What I mean by that is a lot of these systems are inherently very passive-aggressively violent. Violence is baked into a lot of their infrastructure, into businesses, into the way people are commoditized, into the way people are kind of lulled to sleep based on where their food is coming from, chemicals. A lot of people are being gaslit, like, the masses. Very small percentage of people in the world know what's going on, control what's going on, and have the money. And so things like insurance companies, food companies, banks, all these things, like 10%, what is it? It's less than 10% own 80% of the stock market or something. Like it's so skewed, and it's getting even more, the gap between the rich and the poor is getting even more divided. So when there is a complete lack of empathy or sympathy for someone who was fatally SHOT'd, who was a bajillionaire, and, you know, there's a huge manhunt, you know, and this guy is being called Robin Hood. Like, no one went out and said, like, the public isn't saying go out and pew pew all these rich people. No one said that. But after the fact, you know, and the city is being shut down, you know, they're like, violence happens to us every single day. You see all these stories with insurance companies, with health insurance companies, where their loved ones died, where teachers or whomever, people in their community they know, just weren't able to get the help that they needed because companies, people decided profit over someone's health. And that, after a few decades, gets very, very, very old. And this is across industries, right? So this kind of violence, this trickle of violence every single day, when you voted a certain way, when you work really hard, when you play by the rules, and that company is no longer plays by no one's rules, but you have to fill out the paperwork, you have to pay into whatever it is, you have to pay your premium for this month, because if you don't, then for the next year, because then if there's a lapse in premium payment, then you're not going to have health insurance, then you're really screwed, you know. So in retaliation, I guess, or as an answer, if you've done your part, you've had fidelity to your part, and you're up against a company or you're paying into a system that is completely against you, that is, the number one goal is to only make money, which is for a lot of industries, right? Then for some, in this case, it was one person's dharma to create violence or to do violence against that CEO. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's not everyone's role, right? But some people are led to it. I don't know this guy's reasoning. Today's Sunday, so I don't know if there's anything that came out. I haven't even checked the news, thank God, because it's, yeah. But I'm not surprised, you know? And even me, like, just like on TikTok or these other places, like, I am so, in some way, like, it's so understandable. It's so understandable that people are so mad and upset because people have died. People have been injured, maimed, not taken care of, when we have been doing our part into the system. And the system has not been doing what is needed to be done. And after years and years and years, people get very tired. And so whoever's dharma it is to be violent, that's what happens. So, and sympathy runs out. Okay, going back to the Bhagavad Gita, I'm understanding that Krishna is telling Arjuna, just Arjuna, this is what you've been training to do. You're from a warrior family, you're from the warrior class. Like, you are a warrior. This is your story. You are a warrior. You have to do what you're gonna do, and you have to do it very, very, very well. Like, that's what it is. So I guess because of that constant drip of daily infrastructural violence that people experience, it's no wonder. I mean, it's abusive. It's like what a lot of companies do with chemicals and, you know, so many different things. It's abusive. And people who are abused over and over again, and who tell them, who uphold their part of the bargain by paying taxes, you know, going to work 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day, sitting in traffic for 2 hours a day, they do their end. After, you know, and you see your parents doing that, then it's your turn, and then it's your children's turn. But after, like, all this time, it's like people get tired, and that abuse and that violence that is being felt is going to be expressed only in one way. That not everyone is going to, like, all of a sudden take up arms, but like one or two people might. And a lot of us are going to look to that person and be like, you know, yeah, it's not right, but it's understandable kind of thing. So I guess in that way, like, it just kind of gave me an aha about the Bhagavad Gita. This is the third time I'm recording this, so hopefully this makes a little more sense and is a little more cohesive. Excuse me. I'm finally going to do the card pull. I'm just going to pull 3 cards. I'm just going to think about what three things like the deck wants to tell me about my thoughts on the Bhagavad Gita. These recent like conclusions that I've come to, like understanding it. I still think violence isn't the answer, but I understand that now people are putting together vocally in public that these systems are violent. They have killed people and no one takes responsibility. No one takes accountability. Yet, you know, the minute that we are half a day late on some payment, there are credit companies, there are debt companies, oh, sorry, my eyes really, there are all kinds of companies who will come inundating your email box, your phone, your text, whatever it is, asking for that $15 or saying you didn't pay a pink slip, a yellow mail, whatever it is. Like, we are very much reminded, and yet there's no like recourse for us and the companies. So there goes my earring. So my point was, I just wanted to like get a reading on like that drip of violence and feeling abused for many, many years, like infrastructurally, and then how violence is then, for some of us, not for me, an answer in return. So the first card I have is the Maga of Cups, which is a poet. I love writing poetry. And this is the Queen of Cups. And I guess, you know, it kind of goes along with what I was saying about just feeling that sense of what I was talking about yesterday, how you can't separate business from personal. Like, it's people doing business. People will take it personally. You know, like it's an act of like, you know, people can only take so much, I think, is what that Maga of Cups is saying. And the Six of Shells is Pentacles, and this is gratitude. Ooh, this is interesting. I'm thinking of Arjuna, and Arjuna is born and bred to be a warrior, just like all his cousins and brothers and everyone and uncles and neighbors that he's about to go fight. That's like his cosmic role. So here I would think that it's gratitude in terms of having Krishna, having your higher self, having that guidance to say what you're doing is fine because you're doing what you're meant to do, and you have your family behind you. You have other parts of your family, you know, like they who have endured violence at the hands of your opponents that you're about to go fight. So the gratitude for having that guidance, that gratitude for knowing that you're conscious enough, you're in this cup state enough to know that you hate what you're doing. And I think that's actually what makes a good warrior, is when this reigns supreme. When your spirituality, when your higher self, when you've thought about it, when you're around other people that you could talk about these things with, and it's not some sort of like, you don't treat it as a video game. And this third one is the Maiden of Knives, which is the Knight. No, sorry, Page of Wands as the challenger. And again, like the court cards in this deck, it's like the four evolutions of a woman's life. So that can be actual people, or it can be within yourself. And I'm taking these all to be like the spiritual principle. And with the Maiden of Knives, like, it's really interesting also because this is a weapon, right? Which can be used to chop wood, or like shave a carrot, or it can be used to cut someone's finger off. But so I think with the page, and it's interesting that it says the challenger, because it's a very like, you know, it's like home team versus the challenger. You know, it's like us versus them. And I think here what it's saying is that the page is still they're in their infancy. So I think that we as a world, we as a community are still in our infancy of learning about ourselves, of learning about other people, especially as population was growing so much up until, I guess, recently, up until the 2000s, it had like slowed down significantly. But it's kind of understanding our power and what we're able to do, and the possibility of maybe looking beyond violence, or understanding what violence does, and that the people incurring the violence, the warriors and the soldiers, of course they suffer and they get all the glory, but what about the millions of people that are left at home, usually women and girls, who are put through terrible violence because they're basically weapons of war, right? Like, they use them as all kinds of terrible things. So I think what this is telling me is that we're all still like, we don't understand a lot of our acts on both sides, whether you're the one in the company promoting all these terrible ideas that are very risky for people in the middle class, or you're like just a worker, just like I was working at a grocery store. Like, you know, it's like we don't really like great, like that violent power, the violent ability within every single one of us is latent. I think it's definitely there. Being aware of it, but also knowing how to use it and knowing the repercussions of using it. And I don't mean just like physical violence, but I also mean like, especially the knives, like the swords in the traditional tarot is also like, it's like it can cut with both sides. So, you know, like you can have a sharp tongue too. Like, you can have violent thoughts. You can say rude things to yourself and to other people. And a lot of times that can lead to, not a lot of times, but sometimes that can lead to an actual physically violent thing. So I think the page is just saying, y'all are still at a very baby stage. Like, take a step back, understand the consequences of what you're doing. So yeah, that's what I think.